Well, this morning, I find myself in a bitter-sweet situation. I hate that I'm not going to be with you anymore. I really do. I have served a number of churches as intentional interim, and I've had a good time everywhere I've been. But I have to say that I have made more emotional ties here than anywhere else I've ever served. And I'm going to miss you. Really. Okay, I'm going to have to get myself all straightened out here. Today's sermon is uniquely it's unique for you where you are right now. I don't really care if you're in the second grade or you're in the final stages of life. It doesn't really matter where you find yourself. Because this message is speaking to me, and it's funny how that always happens. I preach sermons that, I'm preaching it myself as well. But this is important, so I'm saying to you, listen up, okay? This is important stuff. We can discount it, we can forget about it after you leave here maybe, but I hope you won't, because I think it will make a huge difference as this church, or as you individually move through life, and as this church moves ahead into its future. It's equally important. Okay, you've been warned. There was a family that was traveling. They were going a long distance, and after 3 days of hard travel, they got up and climbed in the car, and the 8-year-old daughter asked this question: "Daddy, when we get where we're going, will we be there?" Now that's an important question to ask about life, for that matter. No single factor so determines the quality of your life as the goals that you set for yourself. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do with your life? How are you going to get there? A study of 200 life histories, really, of outstanding people revealed that they had ordered their lives which were steered towards specific goals. Each person had something to live for. Another study of individuals who had committed suicide, they had felt like their lives had become intolerable, and they committed suicide because they had nothing to aim for, no goals to seek. So, in each case, goals, or the lack of them, made the difference. Okay, guys down here, listen up. Because you need to set some goals of what's important in your life. Because if you're not going anywhere, you get there fast. Nowhere. You got to think about it. We often talk about discovering who we are. The truth is, we really don't discover who we are. We decide who we are. And that decision is made by the goals that we set for our lives. Now I want to point out a biblical character. Have you ever heard of the name Caleb? Who was Caleb? Well, he wasn't as famous as Abraham or as Moses or some of the other characters in the Bible that we could talk about. But he knew what he wanted in life. The Bible gives us a brief glimpse as to who Caleb was. The first picture that we see of him is found in Numbers, the 13th chapter, verse 30. And he was one of the 12 spies that Moses had sent out into Canaan, the land that God had promised, to see what was there and what was anticipated. When the 12 returned, 10 of them said, "There's no way we can take possession of this land. The people are too big. They're giants. They're just too big. The cities are too strong. The challenge is too great. And we're so small and insignificant. There's no way we can do it." Well, 2 of the spies disagreed, Joshua and Caleb. And in the 30th verse of the 13th chapter of Numbers, it says this, "Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, 'We should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome it.'" You see, the majority report was this: we can't do it. There's no way. But the minority report is, let's go up at once and possess the land, for we are able to do it. Now, one of those 2 people was Caleb. Caleb had a dream that focused on the land that God had promised to him. And he was ready to act upon that conviction. Not just think about it, not just point to it, but act upon that conviction. Now, the second picture that we have of Caleb is found in Joshua. Joshua, the 14th chapter, verses 10 through 12. But the doubting Hebrews, you see, and you know the story, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years because they wouldn't believe God and step out and take possession of what God had promised. They were forced to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And finally, this is important, all the doubters had died. And God was ready to start again with a new generation. This time the Hebrews, they moved in obedience to God and established a foothold in their land of promise. This is when Caleb again shows up. And in Joshua chapter 14, verses 10 through 12, it says this, "Now behold, the Lord has let me live, just as He spoke these 45 years from the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses when Israel walked in the wilderness. And now behold, I am 85 years old. I am still as strong today as I was the day Moses sent me. As my strength was then, so my strength is now, for war and for going out and coming in. Now then, give me this mountain," this hill country is the way it's translated in the New American Standard Version, "about which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard on that day that Anakim were there, giants were there. Perhaps the Lord will be with me." Actually, the translation of this isn't "perhaps the Lord will be with me," but "the Lord will be with me, and will drive them out as the Lord has spoken." Now, God had specifically promised this promised land, the land of Hebron. Now, at 85 years of age, he was ready to make his claim. He approached Joshua and he said, I want that mountain that God has promised me. I want it. I'm going to have it. Let's go get it. Now, there are, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, there are three stages of life. There is youth, there's middle age, and there's, but you're looking good. Let's deal with it, okay? Let's just deal with that. Caleb was in that third stage. Yet, he knew where he wanted to go. He was a man with a plan. Some get old and go fishing. Some get old and go hunting. They go hunting for what they know they wanted to do to begin with, and they do it. Now, you're never too old to set goals. Never. Let me say that again. You are never too old, I don't care how old you are, to set goals. Never. For example, at 80 years of age, Goethe finished or completed Faust. At 82, Winston Churchill wrote his 4-volume history, a history of the English-speaking people. At 83, Tennyson wrote Crossing the Bar. At 87, Michelangelo completed his greatest work. As a matter of fact, after Michelangelo's death, they found in his studio a piece of paper, a note that he had written to one of his apprentices. And in the writing of this old man, he wrote, "Draw, Antonio, draw, and don't waste time." At 89, Albert Schweitzer was still running his hospital in Africa. At 90, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes set down some of his most brilliant legal opinions. As a matter of fact, Oliver Wendell Holmes was asked by one of his good friends at the age of 94 why had he decided to take up the study of Koine Greek. And he said, "Well, my good sir, if not now, never." You know? And like the words of General Douglas MacArthur when he was 78 years old, he said this, "Nobody grows old by merely living a number of years." Listen to this. People grow old by deserting their ideals. Years may wrinkle the skin, but giving up on your goals, your interests, wrinkles the soul. You are never too old to set goals and make plans for what you believe God has for your life. But to do so, to set those goals, there's a couple of things that we've got to do. Now, the first one is the thing that the children of Israel, for some reason, let slip. They saw the giants, and they just didn't think that they could move forward. There were giants in that land, and that's true. There were giants there. There were big people. And the city was strong. The challenge was great. But they had a great God that was behind them. If we're going to move ahead, then we've got to overcome the giants. That's the first thing that we've got to do. It won't be easy. Goals aren't instantaneously achieved. They take time. You'll have to face the giants. One of those giants is adversity. You will never attempt anything significant in life without someone trying to stop you. That's just the case. You're never going to attempt anything in life without somebody trying to stop you. Opponents will stand in your way. Some will criticize, and many will discourage you. And that comes from all sides. That can even come from your family. Adversity will rise before you in any task that you attempt. You can just count on it. As a matter of fact, Walt Disney understood that, and every time that, rumor has it, every time that he came up with an idea, a great idea, he thought was a great idea, he would talk to 10 different people, some people that he wanted to hear from. And if they were unanimous in their rejection of that idea, he would begin working on it immediately. Walt Disney understood what it means to overcome adversity. And we've got to get that. We've got to see that some of the things that we believe God has placed on our heart are so important that we'll be willing to face adversity and push through adversity to face that giant and overcome that giant to move in the direction that God would have us to go. Second, the giant of laziness. Now, the reason so many muddle along in mediocrity is that they are too lazy. It's not that they're too lazy to do anything. They don't lack opportunity, not a lack of ability, but a lack of desire. It is really at times their worst adversary, the lack of desire. Sometimes we get lazy because we have allowed regret to become our major pastime. The plumber wishes that he had become a doctor, and the doctor wishes that he had become a plumber. The stay-at-home mom wishes that she had pursued her career, and the woman who pursued her career wished she'd stayed as a stay-at-home mom. It's a never-ending cycle. We can't allow regret to keep us from moving ahead and going in the direction that we can go. Now, there are a lot of things that maybe we should spend a little time regretting. If we've made a mistake and we've seen that, God's convicted us of it, it's something that we shouldn't have done. But once we have confessed it as sin, we need to let go of it. God's forgotten about it. Why can't we? There are certain things that we need to just let go of. We've got to not live in the past and live in regret. We need to forget about that which is behind us and reach forward for that goal that God has for us, that He has set in front of us, that He wants us to accomplish. Okay, we have messed up. There are things that we have done that aren't the best. Okay. We messed up, but that doesn't mean that we can't move forward. It doesn't mean that we can't become all that God created us to be. It doesn't mean that we cannot accomplish that which God has placed on our hearts to accomplish. Yes, okay, that was a mistake, but what happens is the enemy will get us to focus on the mistake and not focus on the goal. We can't do that. We can't live in regret. We just can't do it. We've got to face that. The giant of envy. Now that is something we've got to face head on. As we see others accomplish great things, we can easily allow the green-eyed monster of envy to stop us dead in our tracks. Oh, actually envy can take possession of our minds and dissipate our energies and distract us from that which we really need to do. Like the monsters of, the scary movies that we watch late at night. There's somebody like Frankenstein who created this monster, and pretty soon that monster turns and kills him. Well, that's what happens with envy. Envy conceived in our hearts becomes a raging monster that eventually destroys its creator. That's just what happens. These giants, and really many more that we could name, stand in our way from accomplishing what God has for us. Certainly, part of the problem is that we're facing is what we see in the mirror. Or at least the reflection that's there. That which was once tight now sags. Time, as they say, is a great healer, but a terrible beautician. Where do we start? There's another question. Well, first of all, we need to analyze our gifts. assess our potential. One of the things that we've got to understand is that, and this is something that each of us needs to do. We need to figure this thing out. You see, God has shaped you. He has given you spiritual gifts. He's given you a heart, passion. He's given you abilities. He's given you a personality. Well, some of you He's given a personality. Others of you have been kind of cut short in that category. And He's given us experiences. All of us have experiences. Poor John doesn't have a personality at all. But the thing is, God has shaped us in such a way that when we're living our shape, we're energized. We're moving in the direction. We've got to figure out what that is. We've got to understand what is it that excites you about ministry? What is it that motivates you to do things? What is it that gets you out of your seat? That is really the passion, the heart behind the spiritual gifts, and it moves you in the direction that God created you. What happens, and this is what's crazy, if we're not living our shape, if we're not involved in doing that which God has created us to do, we're really unhappy. And so what happens when we're unhappy, we start trying to figure out, well, why did this happen to me? And why can't I get this done? And why can't that get done? And why, you know, if my Sunday school class would just respond to my teaching, then, well, it might be that you shouldn't be teaching because you're not a teacher. That could be the question, the answer to that question. But find your shape. Find out where it is that God would have you to be working. What are those spiritual gifts that you have? What is it that gets you up out of your seat? What is it that God has, abilities that God has uniquely given you? What does your personality lend itself to? What are the experiences? What are those experiences that you've already have lived through? What are those experiences pointing you to accomplish? Find out your capabilities. Know what that is, and then start serving in that direction. Start moving in that direction, because you're going to be happy. You're going to be energized. You're going to be doing that which God has created you for. And see, that really does make a big difference. Secondly, take things one step at a time. And just to put this in perspective, let me ask you this question. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I mean, that's the only way you can do it. One bite at a time. Recognize that nothing is accomplished instantaneously. But step by step by step, keep focused on that which you have been called to do, that which God has placed on your heart to do, and keep moving in that direction. Strive for balance. That's one of the things that we've got to do, is strive for balance. It's important. College basketball coach was confronted with the latest grades of his star player. His star player had made 4 F's and 1 D. And the dean said, "What do you have to say about that?" And the coach said, "I think he's been concentrating too much on one subject." Okay. Strive for balance. That's one of the things we've got to do. Third, can you see any progress? Well, we've got to be able to see progress. When we set goals, they need to be measurable. For instance, if you want to expand your mind, then maybe you could set a goal of reading the top 50 books recognized by everyone to be important literary accomplishments. 40, 50 books. That's measurable. You can see progress. You can recognize what's going on. But you have to be specific in the goal that you set, whatever that goal is. Another thing that we need to do is make sure you can see your goal. In 1952, Florence Chadwick, who was then 34 years of age, attempted to swim from Catalina Island to the coast of California. It's a long swim. Now, she didn't quite make it. But after she climbed back into the boat, she realized that she was only a few hundred yards from land. She said this, "If I could have seen land, I might could have made it." Well, that points us in the direction of what we need to do. We need to see, have a clear picture, have a clear understanding of the goal that we've set. Now let's walk around this for just a minute as we conclude this morning. When the 12 spies went in to the land of Canaan, 10 of them said we can't do it, 2 of them said we could. Now we as Baptists believe in majority rule. Well, the majority didn't quite have it straight that time. But here's what's interesting. Joshua and Caleb didn't go out and start their own church. Did they? No. They stayed plugged in. They went through the adversity and came out 40 years later and were able to see God accomplish what He had promised years before. That's the good news. The bad news is the majority died in the wilderness. And that's what I'm seeing happening way too much. Now, what I do is I go to churches who have a challenge. And I try to help them through that challenge. Many times when I go to those churches, or when I hear about churches that are maybe needing my services, it's really, 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 really sad. Because they've lost sight of what it is that God's called them to. But the good news is, I'm able to go help them rediscover that. To make it real simple, Caleb never lost sight of what he wanted. I want that mountain. I want that mountain that God has promised me. He had it clear in his mind. He knew what he wanted. Now here's the question I have for you guys. You got a great pastor coming. But you know what? He can't do it by himself. What is it that you want? Now, some of the things that you might want aren't what God wants. Have you ever thought about that? You need to take notice. You need to think about this. What is it that God wants for this congregation to accomplish? Well, we know from Scripture that what He wants is for us to make disciples. He wants us to be yielded to the Lordship of Jesus Christ. He wants us to be involved in study of God's Word. He wants us to be involved in a community. Even when we have different views of what's going on, He wants us to be involved in a community of faith. He wants us to be bearing fruit. Through prayer. You see, God has something for y'all to accomplish. He wants this congregation to be a lighthouse in this community, to share the good news of Jesus Christ with the people around. But you know what? It is going to require all of you to lift your light. Have you ever been to a candlelight service? Oh, I came to one right here on Christmas. Was it Christmas Eve? What's cool about that is it starts with like one candle. But if it's just one candle lit, it's not really giving us much light, is it? All of us have to raise that candle that we've got, that we have lit throughout and then by the time that the whole congregation has one little candle in front of them, there's a great light. Well, that's what we've got to do here, is we've got to raise our light. 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of you isn't going to accomplish much. But all of us working together can accomplish great things. You've got a preacher coming, Grant Bowles, and he's going to try to light your fire. And hopefully your wood's not wet. I hope it lights. I hope that what can take place, and I believe it will, is that you will raise that light high. And that this community will see that Jesus is Lord right here. They will see a community of faith that doesn't give up on each other. They'll see a group of people who are invested in God's Word and who are living out the gospel of Jesus Christ. What is that mountain that you want? You know, I can start naming folks. Bob, what's the mountain you want? John, what's the mountain you want? Marshall, what about you? Glenn, what's your mountain? What is it? David, what's yours? Ralph? Larry? What is it that God has laid on your heart? You've got to focus on that. And you've got to raise... Well, let me just say it this way. You've got to raise the bar. You've got to make a decision that you're going after that mountain that God has promised you. And you, plural. And not give up.